the culture of nonprofit is our margin for error is so narrow. We are held to such high account, not only for our own organizations, but we kind of are all in this together. I heard Cherian Koshi say this once. Of course, we both love Cherian. He said, if Domino's Pizza has a misstep, they have a recall on some ingredient, people get sick, heaven forbid. Papa John's and Pizza Hut don't take the hit. But in the nonprofit sector, if there is a failing, an indiscretion, a scandal with one organization, we are all now suspect.
Welcome, everyone. I am here today with the Tammy Zonker. Tammy, welcome to What the Fundraising. This is like the most overdue conversation potentially ever on What the Fundraising, but I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Welcome, welcome.
I am so thrilled, beyond thrilled to be here with you, Mallory.
So I feel like you are somebody who needs no introduction, but I'm going to have you give your introduction anyways, so I can hear what brings you to our conversation today, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm Tammy Zonker, and I'm founder and president of Fundraising Transformed. I'm president of the Modern Institute for Charitable Giving and the host of the Intentional Fundraiser podcast. But really, the most important thing to know is I've been a fundraiser for nearly 30 years, and probably in the last 10 years or so, really focusing and zeroing in on major donor development and the pipeline for all of that. You know, we see each other at conferences all the time, Mallory. We're both keynote speakers, and we do breakout sessions, and I've worked with clients to raise nearly $1 billion now, and including a single gift of $27.1 million, which was a thrill and continues to be a joy to think about and talk about.
That is amazing. And we could probably have a whole conversation about that one gift. But I know before we hit record, you are speaking with me at the Donor Perfect Community Conference in a few weeks and talking about bravery and boldness in our leadership and our fundraising. So talk to me a little bit about why that theme or topic is so top of mind for you right now.
Well, it's top of mind because never have we been called to think bigger and be braver and to be bolder, whether it's the funding shifts and, the rollback of DEI through the Washington administration. It just calls us to step into the void. And so I've been concerned for a number of years that in the nonprofit sector, we've become increasingly risk averse, right? I know when I was chief philanthropy officer at the Children's Center in Detroit, a great majority of our funding came from Medicaid reimbursement. Right. And so it was all about the culture. And this is true of so many organizations. And believe me, they're an amazing organization. I love them and support them to this day. But that culture, what it really drives is compliance. It's a compliance driven culture because there's so many regulations and boxes you need to check and things you need to do with precision. I think that's true in mental health. I think it's true in healthcare in general. And so we become so compliance driven and so risk averse that we no longer inspire donors to join us in a dream, in a Jim Collins good to great kind of big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's what really inspires philanthropy.
Yeah. What do you think continues to drive that, like playing it safe, playing it small? Like, what do you attribute that to?
Fear. I think it's all driven by fear at multiple levels inside an organization. First, I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations on capital campaigns, and I will often hear the fear, like we're scared to make that stretch goal. We're scared to develop, to go for that higher end working goal because I can't let this fail on my watch. They love the organization so much. And the thought of letting them down or feeling like that something bad happened or disappointing happened on their watch, I think drives us to shrink a little bit, to be safe. Again, all from great intentions. And then I think when you come to the next layer, you have your executive management team. And not only are they accountable to the board and the community, but they also have their staff looking at them and modeling their behavior. And so, we want to be somewhat conservative. We want to make certain that we hit our goals, that we don't fall short. And it's hard to find certainty and take risks at the same time. And then, of course, on our fundraising teams, and I'm sure even on the programmatic side of the house, we want to hit our goals. We want to keep our jobs. We want security and sustainability too. And so it really all comes from fear that I'm going to let someone down, those we serve, our organization, our donors, fill in the blank, or fear of loss.
As you were talking, I thought about something for the first time, as I feel like I always do when we chat, which is, we hear from donors a lot, tell me about your sustainability plan, right? Or if I give this gift, tell me how it's going to be sustainable. And just hearing what you're saying, I'm like, how much of that language makes us feel like risk is not, it can't be in the cards for us. But then the reality is that the status quo or the playing it safe, those things actually are way less sustainable, but they feel maybe more sustainable. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. It is counterintuitive that taking risks, which we could translate if we change the language of risk taking to innovation, right? That would shift it. If we wouldn't budget for risks, we wouldn't budget for like shortfalls, but we could budget for innovation. I think it's a mindset shift. And of course, like I'm a big Mallory Erickson fangirl. And it so often boils down to mindset and how you approach something, right? And I think that's a big part of it. The culture of nonprofit is our margin for error is so narrow. We are held to such high account, not only for our own organizations, but we kind of are all in this together. I heard Cherian Koshi say this once. And of course, we both love Cherian. He said, if Domino's Pizza has a misstep, they have a recall on some ingredient, people get sick, heaven forbid. Papa John's and Pizza Hut don't take the hit. But in the nonprofit sector, if there is a failing, an indiscretion, a scandal with one organization, we are all now suspect. And it's just a different level of scrutiny. And by the nature of how we work, we also focus on a fiscal year. Our goals, our metrics, all of that is hardwired for a fiscal year, but no one can run a business that way, right? You always are looking at the 3-year or the 5-year plan. So the fact that this perfect storm of small margin for error, fear that we are going to let our organization or the people that are participating in our programs, that we're going to let them down, fear that the board would be disappointed, and we have such a short runway called a 12-month fiscal year, it's just this perfect storm, the culture of scarcity on top of that. It has us shrink. It has us be risk averse, and it doesn't serve us. It stifles our innovation. It stifles our creativity. And I know a topic that we are both incredibly passionate about is, the responsible and beneficial use of artificial intelligence. And never have we had more opportunity to be innovative, to push the envelope, to rethink things than now. So if we don't break through this risk aversion, how will we ever maximize the opportunity that is at our doorstep right now?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's so many places we could go from here, but I'm curious because I agree with everything that you're saying so much. And I think one of the things I wonder, I'm sure there are so many people who are going to be listening to this who are going to say, that's my organization, or that's me, what is their first step? They're like, okay, I don't know that I feel bold yet, but maybe I could be a little bit brave, like just a little bit brave to start. What would be like one tiny micro action they could take or conversation they could have that would start to build this muscle?
Yeah. Well, I have two paths. I'm like standing at this crossroads of two paths. The first path is like, if I'm a fundraiser, I'm a development director, I really want you to take a look at, all right, what are the small steps I could take down the artificial intelligence path to take some of those risks, calculated risk, well-researched, very informed, data-informed, expert-informed risks around, could I simply just automate some repetitive tasks? So could I use AI to automate some workflows to free up time for me to spend more FaceTime with my donors, which multiple surveys say that's one of the biggest frustrations we have as fundraisers, is that we're behind our desk too often and, not sitting down with our donors enough. So even starting down that path and then beginning to rethink what we have always known to be true about fundraising and how we operate. I mean, one of the things I'm leaning into is reimagining donor engagement, reimagining what a donor portfolio looks like. I just led a 3-day seminar along with some faculty members, the Institute for Charitable Giving. We were out in Costa Mesa and just asked for a show of hands. How many of you have more than 100 donors in your portfolio? All the hands. Who has more than 150, 175, 200? You just cannot maintain meaningful relationships with that many people. And if we told ourselves the truth, there is a good portion of those people who don't really want meaningful personal relationships with us. And that's demonstrated by the fact that they don't return your call or reply to your email, right? So for some, we shouldn't just by a wealth capacity or propensity or past giving history, we shouldn't automatically make assumptions about how they want to engage. We need to understand how they truly want to engage, what's meaningful to them. And, having been a frontline fundraiser, I've seen it myself. There were some supporters, I'll call him Mr. B. When I first met him, and we can meet on a quarterly basis, or we could give an update. I mean, he was a very major donor. I could drop off an update. We could do this on a monthly basis. And he said, Tammy, let me just stop you now. He said, actually what he said was, honey, let me stop you now, honey. We're going to meet once a year in the month of May, and you're going to bring Debbie and Deborah. He's the only one I ever heard call her Debbie. Deborah, it was our executive director, our CEO, and a brilliant woman. We're going to meet in May. You're going to bring Debbie. I want you to bring the endowment performance, your financials. I want to take a look at that. And we're going to meet after the market closes because he owned a financial advising firm. And so he knew what meaningful engagement looked like to him. And so let's give him what he wants, right? And not keep filling up his voicemail and his inbox. And so I'm just saying, rather than thinking that one size fits all, that a major donor journey looks exactly the same for donor A as donor 200, let's use some of these automation tools, these personalization tools to give people what they want, and maybe some delighters on top, but not overwhelming. And let's simply ask them and then use the technology, the personalization, to give them what they want, which is still pretty darn amazing given the tools at our disposal. And that, of course, then frees us up to have a smaller portfolio of donors who do want that face time. And what if we didn't just have donors at a certain threshold or higher? What if we had a handful of middle donors that were good candidates to move up over time, or a small pool of monthly donors, or some of those legacy donors? Just kind of change it up and engage people and stay connected and connect them. I mean, I really feel like the connection is what people are longing for, and we're not giving them that connection in a genuine, meaningful way at scale.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I love what you're saying here, because I feel like technology is often put, when we think about increasing technology, a lot of fundraisers think that means decreasing the human touch. And what you're talking about is the way in which technology, and particularly AI, actually allows us to scale the human touch in different ways that people want to engage with. And then the fully human components that some donors want and some donors don't want. We actually get to be a lot more human in those interactions, because we're not trapped behind our desk with a bunch of touch points that may or may not land, that we're manually personalizing for everybody. And I love your story about that donor, because I have a similar one too, where I had a donor who, the way that they wanted to meet was me driving to school drop off with them once a quarter. I would take the BART train in. There was a corner I'd meet them on. They'd have their 2 kids already in the car. and I get to see the family and catch up with them. And I
Wow.
be a part of drop off in the morning. And then the drive back to the woman's office would be like when we get to talk about kind of real updates and more of the like organizational piece. But when I really ask that question, like, what would feel good to you? Like, and let's think totally outside the box, because I could tell that this person did want like a human component, that like meeting component, but they were really struggling to figure out when. And meetings kept getting canceled and things kept getting mixed. And I was like, okay, what if we like incorporated this in a ritual that doesn't get canceled every day?
Yes, I love that. And I mean, think about how intimate that is. I'm a mama bear. Like, you're going to meet my kids. You've been vetted. Like, I trust you. I trust you to be in the same space with my children in that family dynamic. To me, that is the equivalent of sitting down or being invited to the donor's kitchen table.
Yeah.
That's super special.
Yeah, I just think that level of creativity is like so necessary, right? Less people have, it feels like, leisure time around their kitchen table, especially if you're working with, donors that have younger children and are also working. And I just feel like we've tried to take this like old way of doing things with completely new patterns of human lives and interaction. We're like, why doesn't this donor want to do this thing? And it's like, well, maybe they don't do that thing.
Exactly. Exactly. It wouldn't occur to them. They don't want to.
Yeah.
And yet we keep trying to force this one size fits all, or maybe there's a couple different sizes,
Yeah.
but we're trying to force a pattern that is just not aligned with their lifestyle or their desires.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that balance, because I feel like there's a piece of bravery here, which is that we try this nuance or this line between operationalizing our fundraising to a certain extent because we need to stay organized. And especially if you have a portfolio that's big, like I can't keep track of all that stuff in my brain. Like, so we need sort of organized ways of understanding these relationships and keeping track of things and stuff like that. And at the same time, exactly to your point, when we try to like stick to this like really methodical kind of progression of a relationship, we lose the authenticity of the relationship itself, right? I've joked before, like I never, when I'm like meeting a new friend, be like, okay, so our first thing, we're going to meet at the playground. We're going to have our kids play together and we'll see like, do they actually get along? And then if that goes well, then after that, in 3 weeks, maybe you could come over to my house for 45 minutes and we'll talk about X, Y, and Z, right? Like real relationships don't grow that way. And so I feel like one of the hardest things about being a fundraiser is this, how you find this middle ground. And I feel like what you're talking about is like there's some bravery. You're asking people to be brave in how they think outside the box about this balance.
Yes. I think there's a couple of elements that we need to recognize and lean into. The first is, I think that we feel scared, like we don't feel brave because we're engaging donors based on factual information. Like, it's the distinction between knowing someone and understanding someone. So, Mallory, I might meet you. You're my donor and I know your address. I know where you live. I know where your kids go to school. Maybe I've even ridden along on drop off, right? Like, I know exactly where they go to school. I know that you're married. I know your educational background. I know like your hobbies. I know you are a writer and all of these things. I know these facts about you. And yet I don't really understand you, right? Because I haven't done the work yet to understand, like, what are our shared values and beliefs? Not just us, but between you and us as the organization. So, why do you support us? What is it? Is your family been impacted by the healthcare, or did you have go to college on a scholarship, or like, what's the connection? And maybe I'm so busy as we get to know each other, I'm so busy queuing up my next question and trying to look good and be prepared that I don't really hear you. And I don't get the meaning behind what you are communicating. And possibly even because of the power dynamics, You're the donor, I'm the fundraiser. So often, not in our case, maybe certainly the reverse in our case, but so often in fundraising, the donor might be slightly older and the fundraiser somewhat younger. And so there's some power dynamics. And again, it takes bravery to engage in that space. Or what if the donor has a misconception about the people that we serve, people in our programs? Or they've bought into some myth about that neighborhood. Or, well, why do people become unhoused? And they have misconceptions. And sometimes we just fawn, we just kind of smile and nod versus saying, that's interesting. Say more about that. Oh, I understand, and I can see how easy it would be to believe that. But here's what I've learned since I've begun working here at this organization, or as I've worked here for the last 10 years. Here's what I've learned. And let me tell you a story of a family that I met, right? So having the courage to kind of push in respectfully on those misconceptions in that power dynamics of that relationship and set the record straight, course correct, educate. I truly believe, these people are giving to you. Most people are not giving exclusively for tax benefits or exclusively for recognition. Maybe there's a few outliers, but most of these folks are giving because they care. They want to make a difference. And so for us to understand that and to guide them, I often think that fundraising is kind of like being what I imagine like a Sherpa. Like we're kind of guiding, we're carrying the load much of the time, but we're guiding and course correcting and navigating the potential dangers to get them to the destination, whatever it is. Like, what do you want to accomplish through your giving? Let me help guide you to achieve that. But it takes bravery.
Yes. Okay. So I want to ask a follow-up question there because it's interesting. Like so much of the bravery that you're talking about is about being curious, right? It's like being genuinely curious. And I feel like maybe there's this fear of what we might hear or fear of, well, if I go off script, or I ask them to tell me a little bit more about that thing. What if they say something that then I don't feel like I either know the answer to or know how to manage? Or what if it opens up this can of worms? And it's like, we know that uncertainty creates chronic, more chronic stress and things like that. And so how do you, when you're working with fundraisers, how do you help them kind of overcome that piece?
Yeah, we just have to normalize. You will not have the answer to every question. That's what it means to be human. And these are complex issues that we are working to solve together with the support of our community. And so I don't believe that our donors expect us to know every answer. And in fact, I think they might even be flattered if we said, that's a fascinating question. I've never had anyone ask me that question. Brilliant. I'm going to make a note. Would it be all right if I follow up with you? I want to talk with Dr. Astorga about that. Or I want to talk with our chancellor because that's incredibly insightful. Now I am, again, to your point, it needs to be genuine. If it's not incredibly insightful, then, I would just say, that's interesting. I honestly don't know. Is that something you'd like me to follow up on? But again, I don't believe in false placating people. It's just inauthentic. It's ingenuine. And I feel like people see through that. I think they know. I think in a lot of times people, if we're not authentic in our engagement with donors, I think they know she's just here for the money. Like she didn't even hear the question, my answer to her question, as demonstrated by the question she just asked, 2 questions later. Like she's just here for the money.
Yeah, this is such important advice. I've had so many conversations with donors over the years, feeling frustrated that they aren't heard in meetings. And one of the things I've thought a lot about is some of that I think is just because we are so stressed, right, in that moment. And so that part of our brain that's just survive, you're so close, you got this meeting, just overcome the objection or whatever. And we leave our body. And then we get to the end of the meeting, we're I kind of blacked out. Did that go well? And so, I mean, I think what you're talking about is so important because what it also really requires, and this is to your point before about kind of like automation and how do we think differently about our portfolios and how do we manage our donors differently from A to Z so that when we are in those meetings, we can be there. Like we can really be there and build an actually connected relationship.
Yes. And part of that is embracing the pauses. As to your point, being curious, asking good questions and asking if we don't understand or we want to understand more deeply, asking people to say more or help me understand or give me an example. And again, that takes trust and it takes that psychological safety in order to have that exchange. Or to your point, to say, that's so interesting. I do not know. I don't know the answer to that question. What a great question.
Yes. Okay. And I feel like it's interesting, like even with the podcast, I don't do questions ahead of time, as you know, because you're like, what are we talking about? And I'm like, yeah, because for so many reasons. One, and it's the same way I could never do scripts in donor meetings. And literally one of my team members today was like, hey, here's an app for a teleprompter for your, I'm like, I don't use a teleprompter. Like everything is off the cuff because and I'm not criticizing anybody who uses those tools, but for me, it makes me way too rigid. I lose my curiosity. I can't go into a podcast interview and say, oh, I'm going to definitely ask these 10 questions and I'm going to be genuinely curious. Like my brain can't do it in order for me to like really fully be there and listen and try to connect dots. And so I think like what you're talking about with folks just has so many different applications and is so important. And maybe, for folks who are like, oh, but I've always, followed a briefing sheet that had 10 questions. It's like, okay, well, how can you maybe have your first 10 minutes not go there yet? Or what are those like kind of tiny steps to activating your curiosity and leaning a little bit deeper until you feel maybe fully safe to go into a more open-ended conversation?
Yes, I love that. And maybe of the 10 questions that you eventually want to ask, you highlight 2 or 3 that are going to be the framework for a great conversation. Like it's just a framework, a jumping off point. And then you are just going to go with the flow. And like you would within any of your personal relationships, right?
Yes.
My partner, Trent, he knows if I come to him with a list, he knows he's in trouble. And vice versa.
Yes. The other day I told Brian, I was like, I have 6 things. And he was like, uh-oh. But to your point, I've also sat down with friends before and be like, hey, like I'm so excited to hang out. And before I forget, I want to make sure that while we're together today, we talk about X and Y because I wanted to do that in person and we're finally here, And
Yeah.
so
Yes.
I feel like they're totally like relationship driven and connected ways to like check off those things that don't make the whole conversation like you're holding this secret agenda and you're trying to figure out the best way to like sequence that secret agenda and the other person doesn't think there is an agenda.
Yes, exactly. And you're reminding me too of kind of the opposite, where sometimes fundraiser or development officer will show up with a donor and it's just a nice visit. How are the kids? How'd the soccer game go? How's your Florida home? Is it recovered from the hurricanes? And while it's a pleasant visit, did the donor receive value? Did you learn more about them and really begin to understand them at a deeper level, a personal level? Was there a value exchange that makes the donor say to themselves, I really enjoyed visiting with Mallory and I look forward to the next time we get together, right? So meaning they understood in some way the impact of their giving or what the current challenges are, including the vulnerabilities, like what's not working. What are the challenges that you're facing? What's going on with your funding right now? What are some of the successes we're achieving? Like a real value exchange. Again, yes, we care about each other. We've built a personal relationship, but what brings us together is our shared value and shared values and belief in this work, this mission. So again, we just want to make certain that it's not just a lovely visit, but there is a value exchange. Just like when you finally get to visit with your girlfriends or your best friend and you walk away just feeling not only acknowledged and understood, but that we've moved something forward together.
Yes, 100%. And that, what I love about that, I was just taking some notes, is like just the sort of like expectation setting, right? Like I had a old client reach out to me recently because she was like, I just had the weirdest experience. I went on a relationship building meeting and the person was really upset. I told them I wasn't going to ask for money and I didn't. But then they were like, mad that I hadn't, they couldn't believe that I had that whole meeting and didn't ask them for money. And so, anyways, I think it's just such a good reminder that like everybody's going into everything with expectations, and it's always great to check those again, be clear in your communication, how you're setting things up, but then also in the moment to like check those live, because when somebody said yes to the meeting, everything could have been different than the moment you're actually sitting down. And so I just love what you're saying, because we should always be challenging our assumptions on both sides of the line.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great distinction.
Okay, I could talk to you forever, but tell everyone, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should be asking you around this?
Well, I want to make a statement and then issue a challenge, if I may.
I would love it.
I think that as fundraisers, as fundraising professionals, nonprofit leaders, so often we drive the organization in unexpected ways. And I often describe it as, with all due respect, I describe it as like we're the tail wagging the dog, right? We're the ones who are so often pushing executive leadership or pushing the board to think bigger, to think bolder, to be more ambitious in our goals, in our strategic plan, in what we want to accomplish, just to be bigger, braver, and bolder. And we're pushing that. And so I just invite you to think about, ask yourself with your team. I don't care if you're a team of 2 or a team of 12 or more. Sit down. Maybe it's a little carry-in lunch or a Zoom, and you ask yourselves, if anything were possible, what would we aim to achieve? And really start putting meat on that. Now, that's not a 12-month kind of thing. I'm talking about a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? A 3-year, a 5-year, maybe even a 10-year vision. What would you achieve if you could achieve anything? And then begin to think, how do we seed this? How do we take this conversation, what we've bubbled up here that undoubtedly inspires us, and how do we seed that and create a generative conversation at the executive leadership level, and then have them drive that generative conversation at the board level? Because we need this. Our communities need this. Frankly, our world needs this right now. They need us being our biggest, bravest, boldest versions of ourselves. And so you're the one. Like, we're the ones. We need to do it.
Yes, I love that. I've just been thinking and saying that so much more, like we're the ones we've been waiting for. And we can do this. We can do this. And so I'm so, so, so grateful for all of your wisdom, for all of your time today. Tell people where they can go to follow you, learn more about you, work with you, all the things.
Awesome. Thank you. So you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, Tammy Zonker, and sign up for my major gift newsletter, which you can do on LinkedIn, or you can go to fundraisingtransformed.com. And if you're interested in learning more about our Modern Institute for Charitable Giving, which is a 3-day seminar offered virtually, all online, you can go to modernicg.com. Thank you, Mallory.
Oh my God.
So great to be with you.
It's always so good to be with you. And thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
See you at the community conference.
Yes. See you soon.
Conference. Okay, see you soon.